Hello, guys. Let's see if there's anyone joining. Hello. Let's see. 6 people in here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Finally, you're here.
I am here. Good
That's so good to see you again, man.
to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. How's been your day so far?
Busy as always. Yeah, so we're good, right? Should we?
Oh, yeah. How is the weather in Amsterdam?
Icy cold, it's sunny, it's confused.
Oh, my Lord. So, for how long are you going to still be in Amsterdam?
I'm here till the 23rd, and then I'm off to my tour to treat people on the West, well, in the United States. That's the plan for now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll be there for about 5 or 6 months, depending. I'm waiting to confirm some appointments in LA, but right now it looks like 5 or 6 months, till the end of July, beginning of August.
Mm-hmm. That's
And then,
amazing.
yeah, and then back to London. Hopefully, maybe I'll go off to Nepal with you. I've been invited to go down to Mexico to some other retreats, so it's very busy. I'm just going for the.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is like a really unique moment for us to heal, because we have much more time, we can spend with ourselves. And this is the best time because if you can get ready now and
Yeah.
when it will finish, we'll be so ready, to live the life that we want.
I look forward to it, and I see that potential, Walter. I see that potential. But it's a really unusual time because I was just talking to a therapist who interestingly wants to work with me with medicine, and
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about people's trauma rising up, people getting triggered. The world is shifted in a way that's unprecedented, and people are being challenged in ways that they never imagined they would, or their identity, or their attachment to what they thought was normal or appropriate, their attachment to the way they live. So everything's being shaken up, and depending on what people, depending on their resiliency, depending on the traumas that they experience, there's a lot of factors that are stirring people up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really great opportunity for people to have a really good look at themselves, to see, um, well, how they're living, how that's been challenged, how they want to maybe evolve or shift, as
Yeah.
well as relationship with Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and relationship with our neighbors, our family, and how
Yeah.
are we to be. So it's a really
Mm-hmm.
great opportunity for us to have a look and transcend ourselves. Whether we do it as a species, it remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also in during this period, we have way less distractions that we used to have before. Because let's say I 1.5 year ago, like I was feeling shit. I could go like to a party, and I could just forget about things. I could just talk to friends and do whatever, go into a bar and drink something. But now you have the things inside you, and now you have to work with that because you have them, you listen to them every day and you cannot avoid them.
Well,
So
if you have the support, the strength and the determination to do that, Walter, because people have a really good way of avoiding pain and avoiding themselves. And
mhm.
yes, you're right. This does give those who wish to take a moment to look at themselves the opportunity to do so. But a lot of people are very good at self-medicating, um,
Mhm.
Netflixing, binge watching, binge eating, binge sexting, binge fucking, like binging everything. in order to avoid themselves, and people are
Yeah.
very adept at that. So again, it's a matter of what sort of support you have and how you want to transcend should you want to do that. You know what I'm saying? You know, putting two people in solitary confinement renders two entirely different results depending on who they are. One person can go mad, another person can work out and sit and meditate and reach nirvana. So it's really depends on the person and their motivation and where they want to end up. You know, many people are happy being in the matrix and being asleep, because to do otherwise would be a threat to their entire identity.
Oh yeah, definitely. So now, since we are in this theme, I would like to ask you, like, why do you think is important right now to do psychedelic therapy, and which kind of impact can have in the long term in our lives?
Well, these medicines have been around since the beginning of time. I'm very happy that the conversation is opening up. Legalization is happening in the United States, and research is being done to help suffering with these medicines. But you know, there's you know, I interface with therapists who, you know, are Western doctors. They're the practitioners of psychotherapy or psychiatry. Some come to me for treatment, actually, or others we interface together because their patients come to me, or they're, you know, they're people that are referred to me and they have therapists that I work with. And we talk about what's happening. You know, the major misconception is that you bottle spirit up, you take the medicine, and you get fixed, right? And that's a huge problem, because there is no magic fix. There's no magic pill. There's no magic bullet. And unfortunately, in the West, people don't want to do the work. They just want to take something and get fixed. And some of these medicines have a profound way to do that. Should the person want to interface with themselves as the new version, I call people version 1.0s and version 2.0s, and not in a disparaging way. I was a 1.0. Maybe I was a 0.08 at that. So it really it depends on your relationship with the medicine, your relationship with yourself, and what supports you and what supports you on your journey. So it's a very involved process, this work. The work I do is super involved generally, and this is why I made a commitment to do the work that I do is generally, and maybe Walter, you know this as well, people go sit on a mat, they take a medicine and have a nice day. And here's a pamphlet and good luck, you know? And that's a major problem. It's a major problem. There are a lot of unscrupulous people that give them medicine for money, and then they walk away, and they walk away with 5,000 or 10,000, and they do that 50 weekends a year, and they're good to go. But there are a lot of people who can get re-traumatized because stuff rises up that they're not ready for. They may have a psychotic break. And then all of these things happen, and by and large, as I noticed with the people coming to me after they've gone to these retreats and have done all the work with the iboga and ayahuasca and this and that, there are people that heal, no doubt, but there are people that come out fucked up. Or it doesn't stick, right? So I created a protocol that's made sense for me. It's made sense for me, and it's made sense for the people that I work with, that sort of cradles them and carries them and supports them before the ceremony, during the ceremony, and especially after the ceremony, so that these changes are enacted, that because they relate with their new versions, they relate with their psyche, they understand, they have support, and so forth and so on. So they can move into 2.0 and remain in 2.0. And people oscillate. Everyone is a human being. We make mistakes. We fall back on old patterns, and that's fine and good. But to be closer to 2.0 is a lot better than going back to 1.0.
Oh yeah, totally. Could you please like guide us through like the protocol that you use and that you would, let's say, suggest to other people to use as well?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I wanted to acknowledge a couple of people before I opening, and we got into the conversation, but I wanted to acknowledge and thank the wisdom and the teaching of Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz, Dr. Gabor Mate, my mentor, Dr. John Douglas, the spirit of the plants and the animals that have taught me, as well as the seekers who are my teachers. So before I begin, I wanted to acknowledge them as well as you. So thank you very much. So, you know, Walter, it's a very big question you asked, and I wish we had hours. And I'm happy to continue this conversation. And it's hard to almost begin. But I was thinking about this question because I figured you'd be asking me, like, what do you do? You know, before any ceremony, like, okay, let's start here. These medicines, by and large, were used in a small community. There was a shaman that lived on top of a hill. Someone had a soul sickness. There was a community of 80, 100, 500, or 1,000. Everyone understood medicine. They had a relationship with it. Someone got sick. They sent that person to the elders. They did the work. They came back. The community upheld them. They supported them. They got better, and they moved on. Well, guess what? Those medicines are now being taken to an entirely different context in the West. And the West has major problems. We have an entire different set of understanding. Our paradigm is entirely different. And our connection, the connection in of itself is missing. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from our work. We're disconnected from our families. We're disconnected from our communities. Gabor Mate talks about the biopsychosocial. And then I'll add another element, the biopsychosocial spiritual elements, the walls, as I refer to them, that contain us. Guess what? Those walls don't exist. So how do you imagine someone goes into a ceremony, gets shot off to the next world, comes back, and then goes back on the 6th train to go to the Lower East Side and go sit in their tiny little apartment when they had an ego death? I mean, this is literally things that have happened. And people are spinning.
Yeah.
There is no, okay, you had an ego death, you went to God, come back and sit in the desert for 5 days and just be with the spirit of the plants and the animals, just sit in your silence. None of that exists. And again, that's extreme. I know people are working in integrity. So we have to look at the walls that contain us, right? So when I work with someone, I look at their walls, right? Like, okay, are you under the care of a physician? Are you under the care of a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist? Yeah. What distinguishes me from a lot of other practitioners is that I'm not afraid of working with people who have mental dis-ease. Mental disease is dis-ease. They are in disease, right? There's something that's missing or something that's not going well in their mind or in their maybe chemically that is causing dis-ease. That disease could manifest in their family. It could manifest in the job that they do. It could manifest in some kind of environmental toxin that they're being exposed to that's going to affect their mind. So it's a really big picture that we need to take into consideration when we're treating people or working with people or sitting with people. That word treating almost sounds very clinical, and I don't pathologize people. People are not sick. They may have fallen out of harmony or out of balance, right? But they've adapted to that, and they become their adaptations. You know, again, I could take this one word and talk for an hour about the adaptations or adaptation. But to make it a short answer, we have to look at the walls that contain people. Are those walls in place, right? Are there people or elements biologically, structurally, chemically that are contributing to their disease, right? Maybe someone has hypothyroidism and they're losing their minds. No amount of medicine will fix that. Maybe not. But then there's structural things. So there's many elements that come into effect that could influence the psyche of a person. For instance, Someone was under my care or I worked with. He'd done 50 ayahuasca sessions. He'd done tons of toad, all these things. But it wasn't sticking. Then, so we unpacked a little. I was like, have you checked your testosterone level? He's like, no. He went to a therapist. Guess what? He had the testosterone level of like an 80-year-old. So that affected his mind and his body, his sexuality.
Yeah.
Of course, there were other elements. There was a lot of childhood trauma. There's many other elements that were sort of plaguing him. But it's an entire ecosystem that we need to look at before we work with someone. That's my responsibility. That's what I look at before I even sit with someone on the mat. That's what I do with the preparation phase. And then we can go into the IFS and all other elements. But if you look at someone's ecosystem, then you understand what they're coming in with, that they know of. You work with them on the mat, and then they come off of the mat. You at least have an idea of what the walls are that contain them, the walls that are loose, the walls that are supportive, and the walls that hinder them. And you in that context. So it's an entirely different process as opposed to here's your medicine and have a nice day.
Yeah. No, I totally feel that. And, I also feel that, so many people, like, what they do is that usually they give, like, lots of power to people on the white jacket. They say, okay, this is genes. I have nothing that I can do. So please, doctor or pharmacy or medicine, help me.
Yes.
And that's like crazy, because epigenetics, right? So basically, like, most of like our genes and all our genes expressions depends from the lifestyle. If you either meditate or not, if you either work out or not, if you either go and do some sun exposure or not, cold exposure, all of this is going to have an impact on your body, on your mind, and on your whole well-being. So I would honestly like say to people really that we have much more power than we think. And then I would say once we reach a level that is like, okay, that's not the more I can do, then we can access to this deepness of psychedelic integration and psychedelic work and everything else that is behind that.
Yeah. You touched on a few points, Walter, and they're very valid. When I work with people, I tell them, okay, the wisdom and the healing is inside of you. You may have just forgotten, right? I am just shining the light on spots that you may not be seeing, or your blind spots with the help of medicine, but the wisdom is inside of you. So I'm immediately placing the power back into their hands and into their bodies, right? A lot of people, I work with people who have a lot of sexual trauma, for instance. Things are done onto them. They lose power. They disconnect from their soul, right? They disconnect from their physical power. And to remind them that the wisdom is in their body and in their hands, and that the power is in their hands, is really empowering. So I literally may stand by their side and say, it's all inside of you. The difference between that and a doctor or a therapist is it creates an imbalance. The therapist or the doctor, I am sick. And in a way, and unfortunately, that imbalance needs to be maintained. Someone needs to be sick in order for someone to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Right? Doctors would be out of jobs if people got healed. Of course, again, I respect doctors. I have friends who are doctors, and I do not in any way, shape, or form disparage their work. And it's very important work that they do, right? But at a certain level, when you empower the person to go and heal themselves with the tools that are available that come out of the ground, that's it. Here you go. Have a nice day and have a nice life. When I work with people, I have a soul contract with people. Really, like, people can call me that I've worked with 3-4 years ago. I'm not running into this issue. I'm like, okay, I can talk to you, or maybe tomorrow, right? But what I tell people is, once I'm done working with you, I hope to never see you again. Why? Because you'll be done. Done with your suffering. At least you'll have the tools. So there's a major difference there between Western practice and maybe a shamanic practice, or like non-traditional or holistic practice that may differ from some of the Western practitioners do.
Yeah.
They're bound by certain rules. It's very reductionist scientific approach to science,
Yeah.
the body and to the mind. And there's a disconnection. The mind is sick. They don't consider the body. They don't consider all these other elements that are going around that affect people. And the other thing you said is epigenetics. Yes, we carry genetic markers, and depending on what happens in the biopsychosocial and, in my opinion, spiritual facets of our lives, some things may get triggered, right? That may trigger disease.
Yeah.
And there is a lot that happens there that we need to really take into consideration when we as human beings consider our healing. Whether we try to do the traditional Western approach or a non-traditional or shamanic approach, which I think in a
Yeah.
lot can be very healing effective.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about like trauma and how this can have a negative impact in our long-term life. So, and I would love to ask you like, what is trauma and where it comes from and how does it build like during like a lifespan?
Yeah, but very good question. Very good question, Walter. Well, first I'd like to start by saying that we should normalize the word trauma and normalize and allow for people to express that they have experienced trauma. Okay, we're very resilient as a species, as men, as women, and I've talked to men, right? And I say, I with whatever, I work with sexual trauma, I work with trauma. Like, well, I don't have any trauma. I don't, immediate shutdown, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. Yeah, maybe they don't have sexual trauma, but trauma is trauma and trauma is relative. And when you talk to them, and they're like, yeah, I was beaten up by my dad, but no big deal, right? Let's hypothetically use the word James, and I'm talking to James, and he's 39. So this is some of the language I use. I'm like, okay, James, 39. You're telling me that your dad took a belt to you when you were 8 consistently for 2 years, and you were beaten and bruised, and you were bleeding, and you couldn't go to school, and you had all this shame. But it's okay. James, you're saying it's okay at the age of 39. But what would James 8 say right now if he felt or saw his dad coming at him? What would his experience be like? And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to literally go back. I mean, it's incredible how much we try to push away our pain, right? And it is hurtful. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to address it. But these are like thorns that are in our souls, right? Gabor Mater says it's not the trauma that is traumatizing, it's what happens to us as a result of it, right? So, trauma could be systemic. There could be little traumas like microaggressions that build over time. There could be one big trauma, and that could sort of snowball in many other traumas because we carry these energetic weights in our bodies, and we make decisions based on traumas which re-traumatize us. So a lot of people that are in trauma, Gabor talks about the population of people that he worked with in Vancouver, right? He said all the women that were drug addicts were victims of sexual abuse, molestation, and rape. If not all the men, they were victims of physical abuse or some kind of abuse. So people get fucked up, and they continue on being fucked up until they kill themselves, right? So they disconnect, they become disconnected from their essential self because of trauma. They need to disconnect for themselves to survive that, but then they remain, they leave from a state of being, and that state becomes a trait, right? So they become the adaptations to what they adapted to during that trauma, and that becomes their personality, right? And that personality gets kind of fucked up as they live life, and they attract all these other elements to them that vibrate and resonate on that frequency, and there you have it. So to look at trauma, to look honestly at trauma and befriend it is a very, very important part of healing. We all have trauma. Birth can be traumatizing. I worked with someone who was medicated for 17 years of her life. She's actually becoming a therapist. Medication, this, that, and the other. We did medicine work, and it turned out she had birth trauma, and everything became clear.
Yeah.
So these things can be very revelatory, but we have to befriend the concept of trauma and the fact that we may have been traumatized, and it's totally okay.
Yeah, for sure, sure. And tell me, like, which do you think is one of the best ways to actually overcome traumas, and how then it can affect the rest of your life without traumas? By the way, give me 1 second. I'm gonna turn on the light.
Sure.
Here you go. So here we are.
Dealing with trauma. Okay, so I can talk about it in an anecdotal fashion, and share with you what I've learned and the work that I've done. Right?
Yeah.
So the trauma happens. We adapt to that. That becomes a trait, right? We leave from a state of being, and it becomes a trait. So we identify with that, right? We identify with who we became as a result of the trauma. The trauma energetically lives in our bodies. The trauma energetically lives in our minds, right? And again, I refer to this trauma as a thorn, and people really resonate with this. And I'll use this metaphor with you, and that you'll connect to it immediately. So you've worked with wood, or you've been in a garden at some point, and you've gotten a thorn stuck under one of your fingers in your hand. Yes? Okay. And you've tried to get it out with a needle, and it just goes deeper and deeper, and at some point you forget about it. Yes? But you reach out to grab a cup, and you hold tight onto the cup, and you realize that you had that thorn, and maybe it hurts, and you want to let go of that cup, right? Okay. So that's trauma right there on a deep soul level, right? So we become averse to certain things that trigger the traumas, perhaps subconsciously, unconsciously. We don't even think about it, right? And we get redirected, right?
Yeah.
So with medicine, for instance, to meet our trauma, right? To become witness to it, and to reestablish a relationship with that person that was traumatized is very healing. Sometimes the trauma literally energetically needs to leave our body, right? There's energy that doesn't belong in our body, and medicines have a really beautiful way, with the right practitioner, to release those energies. Sexual trauma, for instance, working with women, one person that I worked with, again, very, very difficult case. But, I work with her. I do some body work. This is all with permission. We move the energy. We moved it. At some point, I said, listen, it's your turn, because there's certain below the navel I don't touch, right? So I grabbed her hand, put it above her navel, and I said, it's time for you to move it out. And she started to move it out. And then literally the stuff started coming out of her root chakra. And she started purging. I mean, there was vomit and God knows what everywhere for 4 or 5 hours at night. And I was like, okay, cool. This is what needs to happen. So we literally release things that don't belong to us. And filling that space, again, with love and compassion for ourselves, and filling that gap that's created is also very, very important, right?
Yeah.
And this is part of the healing process, and reestablishing relationship with ourselves.
Yeah. No, that's really deep, and I can really resonate, because I have had traumas in my life, and I know how, like, for example, one of the traumas that I have, that when I was really young, like I used to be rejected from my teachers at school, and so basically I learned that it was that I wasn't enough, right? So then what happens is that with years, I became really sensitive to rejections, really sensitive, as you said, like when something triggers. So then, like, my life will be such a difficult one because every time I would get rejected, I would like be sad for days, you know. And when I did this kind of shift, you know, I kind of accepted like whatever happened in my past and have done some inner work, you know. I could finally, you know, be rejected and not feeling shit for months, you know. And that's a really good feeling. And I'm sure lots of people resonate out there, like with the rejection thing, because this is one of the things that most happens, like when we are really, really young. And by the way, I would love to know, like, there is any kind of therapeutical specific ways that you use when in case to healing traumas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're talking about internal family systems. You know, part of what I work with is the compassionate inquiry from Gabor Mate. I use existential well-being to sort of establish the container or the walls, and then working with internal family systems (IFS) to help people negotiate. And it again, that's a really really big topic. You know, um, to answer your question, so basically, what we do. When someone's in the medicine, or they don't even need to be in the medicine, depending on where they're at. You know, I work with MDMA, which is a really beautiful way to take people to their vulnerable exiles, the vulnerable parts that got hurt, right?
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes we don't need to do it in medicine. I've done work with IFS with retrieval, where we basically go back to the point of trauma, and that involves a process of getting permission from the protectors, like, because we have protectors and managers in our minds that keep us from being exposed to vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by others, right? So they start
Yeah.
acting up, and they could show up in our bodies or in our thoughts or our behaviors, right? So what we do, and I love to call them the knights, because I use sort of like this metaphor of a castle, right? So imagine someone like me trying to get into someone and trying to work with them and going to address some of the things that are traumatic for them. But if their protectors or their knights are up, they're going to do whatever possible to prevent me, the facilitator, and for instance, you who is coming to me for help, from getting to a place where we can start to look at the vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
But working with the knights, right? Getting permission from the knights. Maybe we need to address their concerns, because knights were there, put in place by the psyche for a particular reason. So we go and
Yeah.
talk to the knights or the protectors. Say, well, what would happen if you guys calm down? What would you be afraid of if you guys relaxed? And we go and answer. I go and answer to those concerns, right? So the knights eventually, at some point, calm down, right? In medicine, it happens a lot quicker. Without medicine, it takes a different protocol. I'm not that good. You know, Richard Schwartz, bam, he's there. But, you know, everyone is different and everyone's got different stuff, right? So
Yeah.
you ask the knights, you ask the knights to rest. Then you go into the part that is causing the turmoil, right? And that could be the part that you're interfacing with. And then you ask that part, what would happen if you didn't do this? What would happen if you didn't cause Walter to bite his nails, right? What would happen if you stopped that? And then the exile would come out and start to speak. So then you would essentially bring the exile up to date and ask the exile, how old do you think Walter is? So we start to interface with the exile, and then ask the exile what happened and what is your story, because Walter wants to hear your story.
Yeah.
So he knows that. So the exile knows that Walter is there, Walter in the present moment, to heal that exile, right? And that's what's great about IFS is it's non-pathologizing and it's self-directed. You are relating with yourself. I'm just showing you the way, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you know, whenever you were antagonized by your teachers, for instance, when you were 8 years old, You know, you took on certain beliefs, so certain distortions. You became those distortions, or part of you became that distortion, and that distortion would be triggered. We have
Yeah.
rejection. Rejection happens at any time in our lives. It just consistently happens. But how do we update the system? You're not back in that classroom anymore, Walter. You left that classroom.
Yeah.
And you brought Walter when he was 8 back to the present moment and took him somewhere where he wants to be, instead of, you know, being in a place where he felt rejected and ridiculed.
Yeah.
That could be really beautiful as an energetic release when you're in medicine. Because you realize the shit that you're holding on to, that is so deep that you don't even have. So the thorns start popping out, right? And then you update the system. And maybe it's happened a few times, but it is really, really beautiful, profound work. I hope I answered that question. I went on for some time.
Oh yeah, no, sure, definitely. Honestly, like, really, actually, what I want to know, like, I want to know, like, which kind of specific therapeutic use do you use for healing traumas? And EFS looks so powerful, and I've been interested in EFS for months now, and it's something that I really want to go deep and then learn about it. Actually, I want to do a course and getting at least the level 1 and see. And actually do this kind of work, because the people have died on me, and wow, it came up things that I never knew, but they were so clear, you know. So it's something that I really want to help people to get there. But I would love to know from you, like, why do you think that with the help of MDMA, this kind of experience can be more efficient?
Sure. So MDMA gets you in a, you know, I use MDMA and psilocybin together. So it's like.
So you use MDMA and psilocybin together?
Yeah.
Great. And what is the dosage that you use?
It all really depends on the person, Walter. And we've discussed this in private. I'm not one that is a huge fan of overdosing people or just giving them a ton of medicine. Okay. And I use the metaphor of keeping people on the bridge, and we've discussed it, which is, I don't think real deep work gets done when you push someone to the edge on the other side.
Yeah.
That's fine. They'll have their metaphysical experience. Maybe they'll freak out for 10 hours because that's what needs to happen. That's fine and good. But in my opinion, to allow people to stand literally in their power, to be on that bridge, and to start to do the work when their limbic system, the prefrontal cortex calms down, the nights calm down, and you go back with safety and open up with a medicine that opens your heart, that calms the nights down, is a beautiful way to do it. And again, the dosage really depends on the person. I worked with someone not too long ago. He had done ayahuasca in Peru, got what he needed, and that was good. He did toad medicine with me, got what he needed, that was good. And then we went in, and very little medicine. It was the right scenario, the right context, the right setting, with the right facilitator, because he trusted me with his life. And I just gave him a kiss. He went to exactly where he needed to go to resolve exactly what he needed to resolve. So while it's dosage dependent, of course, I'm not a big fan of dosing people because, okay, this is formulaic and voila. You know, it's really based on intuition and my relationship with the person that's sitting with me, and where they're at when they're on the mat, how they present. There's many different factors. I don't like to maintain a formula about it because it is not formulaic for me.
Yeah. But the main reason why I ask you is because I want to make the audience aware that we're not giving like tons of grams of MDMA and then they start to see the stars, you know. Like, I want them to know that we use really like small dosage. It's not that huge dosage that we use like in parties and people get intoxicated and then they get also like lots of bad side effects, you know. But we want them to know that we use really small dosage that give that feeling that you were talking about. This inner peace and this inner love, and you just open your heart and you feel like you want to talk.
Yeah.
more about those things that you've been avoiding.
Yeah. I mean, Walter, I'll use another example. I do group retreats, but not a large group, maybe 5 to 10 maximum, because I find it to be incumbent on me to
Yeah.
be there for every person that I'm working with. And it's very difficult. I can't split myself in 10. But, I sat with someone, I sat with them for about 20 to 30 minutes just to see where they're at energetically, what they're coming in with. And I gave her 1/4 of the threshold dose. So basically 20 milligrams of MDMA.
20 micrograms.
Milligrams of MDMA.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
So 20 milligrams of MDMA, so 1/4 of the threshold, right? And I gave her something like, I don't know, 30 milligram, 30, excuse me, 30, 30 grams of milligrams, not grams, of psilocybin, right?
Yeah.
She was purging all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what
And
she
for trauma releasing, right?
releasing stuff, yeah. And had
Yeah.
I given her any more to her, she would have been freaking out, right? And the following day, I took her to the spot where she was purging, right? So I said, "Come, let me show you something." She's like, "No, I don't want to look at it." I was like, "Come on, just trust me. Come, let's look." And so I grab her and I drag her to that spot, and she looks and she's like, "Where is it?" I was like, "There it is. You don't see it?" She's like, "No, where is that stuff? There's all this puke that was coming out of me." I was like, "The energetic puke. It was toxins that were in your system that were not yours, and you were releasing it." So again, really, it all depends on the person, what they're coming in with,
Mm-hmm.
the context, how they're presenting that day. That really determines where they're at. As I said, I don't get off on seeing people freak out, and I don't think it will do them any good.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to know, like, how would you manage, like, someone that is like having like this kind of experience and is like into these traumas and they're having a really bad feeling and they're starting to have some kind of not a panic attack, but they're really scared about what is going on. So
Yeah.
how would you approach someone in that situation?
Okay. Very good question, Walter. I will tell you that up to this moment, with the MDMA psilocybin protocol, with toad medicine, it's a different matter, right? But with MDMA psilocybin, if you're getting permission from the protectors or the NAC, if you're doing all the work and the safe containers in place, even if they may have things that are unpleasant that are coming out, they're not going to freak out, right? And they know, because the trust has been established with me, they know that I'm there and I'm going to help whatever's necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're surrendering. They completely are letting go, and I may be working on them. I may help them release stuff. I may just hold them, whatever needs to happen. But by and large, and generally, I don't, like I said, like the sexual trauma case, yeah, she was purging and releasing, and that was okay. I got puked on all night. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. It's just what needed to happen. And I'm not going to block it, or I'm not going to try to interfere and try to reduce that. I'm like, great, it's time for a celebration. Let's scream, because this is what needs to come out of your body.
Yeah.
And so I celebrate. I don't try to curtail it or control it or prevent it from coming out. If you need to scream for 10 hours, great, let's scream.
Yeah.
I have had something like that, Walter.
Yeah, yeah. So which could be like some other ways that people can release traumas? Because purging is one example. But I think there
Yeah.
are some people that they are like afraid of purging, and maybe they are not releasing that kind of traumas with purging. So which are some other ways people release that?
All right. So another very good question. Very good question. There's, if you get into somatic experiencing, for instance, or EFT, there's many other practices, whatever, holotropic breathing. There's different ways to access these spheres of energy that are blocked, right?
Yeah.
and working with them and working them out. So you don't necessarily need to have a psychedelic to get to that place. Um,
Mm-hmm.
those are not my practices, so I can't necessarily speak to those with conviction and expertise. I just can't. Um, but what I would say to someone, I would say allow what needs to unfold, to trust the process and let the energy move the way it needs to move. I just worked with someone here in Holland who's 22, very young, right? And we got prepared, did a lot of work, and interesting enough, there was not necessarily too much trauma in the sort of in the textbook way, but there was energy in her body that no longer served her. And
Mm-hmm.
I helped her. I touched her body and I helped move things out. And it was a beautiful thing because she understood that it was just something that needed to leave her system. So she allowed it, and it came through her head, not through her mouth. Her head and her spine started vibrating for 4 hours, and she was exhausted afterwards, but it left, and it was a nice thing. So,
Oh yeah.
so purging doesn't necessarily need to come in the form of like vomit, or diarrhea or urine or something. And if it does, that's okay too. But to really allow your body to work out with its intelligence, and allow it to do what it needs to do to release, is part of surrendering. And hopefully with a good facilitator who knows how to facilitate that process, you can do that and release.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And wow, that was really a lot of stuff, Payman. And honestly, I would love to know just more about. I would love the audience to know like more about you. Like more about what type of work you do, for how long have you done it, and
Sure.
what is the impact that you wanna give on the world? Like, tell me that.
Sure. Good question. How long do you have? um, well, I will say this. Um, my goal is to really help people harmonize. You know, when I work with people, sometimes people are difficult. But they have kids, for instance, and I say, yeah, I love working with Jews. I love working with people who have intergenerational trauma. So what I tell them, I'm like, you're doing this for yourself, and I'm helping you do it for yourself, but you're healing your generations back, you're healing your ancestors, and you're healing your future. So you're doing this for your kids. And for me, the greatest pleasure is to know that I'm helping the healing of kids and generations ahead of me that will never meet me and never know that I existed. And
Hmm.
that's probably the biggest gift that I can give anyone, and I wish to give. You know, um, and that's it, Walter. That's really like the genesis of my work, is to help people be at ease, to be at peace with themselves, and create this harmony without, as they are doing that within, right? And
Yeah.
I look at the state of the world, and I could sit here in absolute despair because everything's so fucked up, right?
Hmm.
But there are people that are working in integrity. That there are people that are good people that are trying to help. And if I can leave this body knowing that allowed, or I helped 10 other people breathe easy and live a better life, I've succeeded. Um,
Hmm.
I know that I've done that with more people, and I hope to continue this work for a very, very long time, until I take my last breath. I hope to do that, to be of service. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm open to the universe. I'll go to Nepal with you, I'll go to Mexico, I'll go wherever, and do this work and learn from other people, because everyone's got wisdom. And my mind is constantly evolving, changing, and shifting. And that's why I thank my seekers, because they're my teachers. I know things,
Yeah.
but they know more than I do, because they've been inside themselves. They're giving me a glimpse, and they've trusted me to do that. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's a great honor. Um, and yeah, I mean, I started with, I got shot off to the next world with toad medicine. It ripped all my stuff open, and my mentor was there, who's a psychiatrist, and I said, show me the way. And he said, yeah, you had a shamanic initiation. I didn't know what the hell that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, show me the way. And so he started taking me to mushroom ceremonies, and I had the visions, and I had the somatic experiences. And, you know, energetically, I would merge with people so I could feel their
Yeah.
pain, I could feel their blockages, I could feel their trauma. For a long time, I thought I was losing my mind. And John would say, "No, Pine, this is totally okay." You know, he would take me and or call me and say, "You need to come sit with this person." I sat with an ayahuasca shaman who came foretold, and John, you know, that day, John's like, "Go see Pine," and we sat down, and I helped a lot her because she had things inside of her body. So, you know, he calls me the human sonogram because I can, in medicine, go into people's shit and move it out or rip it out with
Yeah.
permission. Um, so that's sort of what happened to me. And I didn't choose this, Walter. You know, I didn't go to shaman school. I don't call myself a shaman, but I didn't choose this. This was not part of my paradigm. It was not something that it was not even on my radar. You know, I didn't think, oh, I was going to go travel the world and work with other medicine people and help people in medicine and live in Holland. It was not part of the
Mm-hmm.
idea that I was going to uh, live like in my life. But it happened, and I surrendered, and I said, show me the way, and here I am, and I'm happy to be of service. So that's sort of the genesis of my work and the things that I hope to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the same for me. Like, I wasn't at all like choosing to do that. Like, I was actually having some kind of other like roadmap. But it is so crazy, like how, like whenever I had my first very experience of ego death, and I wasn't anymore choosing the life I wanted based on my traumas, based on seeming cool, based on what my parents want. Like for one, the first time, I said, okay, what is the real one thing that I think I'm really, really would give my heart and my full life to that? And it came up so easily, and it was like helping people for sure, but how can I actually really, really like get like into that and really give the best of impact. And I found really psychedelic really to be the best tool because I'm no one to say like, oh, do this, do that, and you fixed. Who the fuck am I to say that, right?
Yeah,
That's too much ego
yeah,
involved in these kind of ideas. So what I gotta say is that okay, I will give you guidance. I will give you exactly how to do at least to have a really good and energetic and healthy body. How you can do some kind of things like to have a better like general life.
yeah,
But then the real work must be done by you. I can
yeah,
assist you. I can go through all the traumas and all of the things. But most of the work is done by you, and the medicine will help you remove all of these blocks, remove all of these walls that we put between us and life, and
yeah.
see this finally. So this is how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Walter, and that's elemental. You know, we are all our own healers. We just forgot. We've
Yeah,
just forgotten. Um, and you know, there's many different modalities. You know, I say this quite a bit with commission. Just because the medicine's there doesn't mean you need to take it or you should take it. It's not easy work, and it can get very challenging, but it's definitely a really beautiful way to manifest the nature of your mind and for you to heal from the things that are in the shadows. Uh,
yeah,
and as I said, work with a, a facilitator that you are in harmony with, that you trust. That's absolutely, absolutely important. That you can surrender to, that ensures that you're safe, so that you can unfold the way you need to unfold and have them support you in the particular way that they can with whatever talents that they have. And then once you're given this toolbox and all this wisdom that's always been inside of you, it's incumbent on you to move forward and to heal yourself. Should you want to do that? Should you
mm-hmm.
want to stay in 2.0 and not identify with your dysfunctions and your disease and not identify with 1.0? But that requires you to do the hard work. That requires you to change the container or shift the walls around and maybe even knock certain walls down that have been restricting you as they're containing you. So it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of support. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of strength, but it can be done, and it can be done in a very, very beautiful way. Should you want to do this, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is like one thing that you think like people can do right now before to actually get started with all of this? Like, let's say the one thing that they can do by themselves.
I think when I work with people, I do a 1 hour call. I don't charge people money because I want to make sure that they're the right candidate and I'm the right candidate to help them. But after I speak with them, I ask them, please sit with it. Sit with it and sit with what your intuition says. Sit with it and see what my message has been and if that's resonant with you. Sit with it and see how I would help you and if that's helpful to you, you know, with the work that I do, and see if that makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, it's a very, very personal work and it requires time and attention. It's not a magic bullet. There's no quick fix. And if you think that's it, then you're mistaken. And you should definitely not be doing any work with medicine. So really just sitting and listening to the wisdom of your soul, right? And if your soul says no, because it's not the right time, then you need to honor that as well. But like I said, there's many, many different elements that are at play. Those elements I sort of discuss when I do my calls, and I encourage people to have a think about and see if they're willing to make shifts necessary to do deep healing work. So just sit with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to talk with the people right now, and I would love to ask them if they have any question. I saw there was someone earlier asking about if is Kundalini or vibrational spasm purging. Can you answer that, Payam?
What's the question? I'm sorry, Walter.
So the question that Jill asked is Kundalini or vibrational spasm purging?
It can be. Again, it's not part of my practice, so I can't speak directly to Kundalini arising. You know, people talk about like aligning their chakras, and you know, and that's all fine and good on textbook. But if someone takes toad medicine and their chakras are completely opened up, you cannot operate literally physically on this plane. So if certain chakras are blocked or there's heaviness, there's a particular reason for it. Yeah, if you want to release energy that way, so be it. If you feel that helps you, that's fine. So long as you're making a relationship with what's lying in your mind as well. So that's important. You know, to do a physical practice without the mental connection or the spiritual connection, it's just a physical practice. It's just like asana, yoga, but then not doing the 7 other limbs. It's just body movement.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I would love to ask for the people now joining if they have any questions for us that we might be answering. In case we can just wrap up really easily, and there is something that actually me and Payam would love to do for all of you. So basically, we would love to do a EFS session live, because we would love you to show the mechanism, how it works, and I will be happy to be the guinea pig, and Payam will be happy to facilitate it, and we want to do that. So if you guys would like to have that, please let me know, and that would be super amazing. What do you think, Payam, about that?
I'd be delighted to. I have next week, and then I'm basically packing up, and I'm going to be treating people, so it's going to be very difficult for me to do that after the 23rd. But if you want to schedule and if there's interest, I'll happily do that with you, and we can decide that at some point. I don't, I think we have 5 minutes. I don't know. Are you keeping on track of time, Walter?
No, I was going with the flow, because I saw there were people interested. That they were, I think that there's also 26 seconds remaining. So, but that's fine. So that was the message that we want to give. So we've done pretty much everything we want to talk. So it was pretty good.
Wonderful. So yeah, I'll wait for you and your audience, and hopefully we can do a session next week at some point.
Amazing.